Movie trivia makes being a fan even more fun, like knowing that Emma Watson had a crush on Tom Felton during the filming of Harry Potter, or that Sean Connery wore a toupee in all his James Bond movies. But some of the trivia is weird and makes your second binge watch even better. So today, we're picking 15 of our favorite weird behind-the-scenes movie facts that you probably never knew. Let's dive in, starting with number 15, Goodfellas. During the scene where Jimmy Conway's counting a large stack of cash, Robert De Niro didn't like how fake money felt in his hand, and he insisted on using real money. So the prop master actually withdrew $5,000 in cash of his own money to use in the scene. At the end of each take, nobody was allowed to leave until every penny was accounted for. Honestly, we'd have security on standby in case anyone makes a run for the exit. Next is number 14, Interstellar. Have you ever wondered whether the cornfield in the movie was real? Now, knowing Christopher Nolan, he'd want to launch himself into an actual black hole in order to film it without CGI. But a cornfield is grown on several hundred acres of land, and it'd be easier to just use VFX and post-production and save yourself the hassle. But not for Nolan. He actually planted 500 acres of corn just for the movie. It was a huge risk too, because it meant taking out $100,000 to do it. So the production crew got the land in Western Canada and grew a cornfield from scratch. In the end, it worked well for the film. Cooper driving through the cornfield was basically an ASMR experience because of how real it was. But it didn't just pay off in the movie. Nolan and company ended up selling the corn and making a profit off it. At number 13, we have Troy. Troy was an example of a 2000s movie that just worked, and not just because it had a brilliant cast. The action set pieces were some of the best we've ever seen. In fact, Brad Pitt and Eric Bana didn't use stunt doubles in their duel. Usually, you have a stunt double taking care of the wide shots so you don't injure yourself, but not Pitt and Bana. They made a gentleman's agreement that they'd pay each other for every accidental hit, $50 for a light hit and $100 for a hard one. Now, if you had to guess, who do you think owed the most money? If you thought Eric Bana, then you're dead wrong. Brad ended up paying $750, and Bana owed $0. For number 12, it's American Psycho. Remember the scene where Detective Kimball was interviewing Patrick Bateman and you weren't really sure if he actually committed those brutal murders or not? There's a genius reason for that. In order to keep the audience guessing, director Mary Harron asked Willem Dafoe to act in 3 ways in 3 different takes. In the first take, he knew Bateman was the killer. In the second, he only suspected it. And in the third, he had no idea who the killer was. The takes were spliced together, so you never knew what Kimball was thinking. Up next is number 11, Terminator 2, Judgment Day. We never knew how hard it is to play a Terminator until this piece of trivia. Robert Patrick, who played the T-1000, had to learn how to fire a gun without blinking because James Cameron wanted him to look like an actual robot. In the director's commentary, Cameron noted that he wanted the Terminators to blink as little as possible, so Patrick went through some serious training so he could pull it off successfully, making him an iconic villain from the 90s. At number 10, we have The Godfather. In the opening scene, you see Vito Corleone holding a cat in his arms and being slightly distracted by it. But it turns out it wasn't an interesting character trait written for the character. During the day of the shooting, Francis Ford Coppola found a stray cat while he was out on the lot at Paramount. He brought it in, and Brando used it to give his character more depth. The best part, though, is the fact that the cat was purring so loudly that it muffled some of Brando's dialogue, so most of his lines had to be re-recorded later. Coming up is number 9, Django Unchained. During the dinner scene at Calvin Candy's farmhouse, Leo DiCaprio was actually bleeding from his hand when he smashed it on the table. The glass went straight through his palm, but he ignored it and stayed in character. He even used blood to intimidate Kerry Washington's character. Tarantino was so impressed that he used that take in the final cut. Next up is number 8, Schindler's List. Schindler's List is easily one of the most depressing films we've ever seen, and if it's depressing to watch, then imagine the atmosphere during production. Steven Spielberg felt that the depressing tone was too overwhelming for the cast and crew, so he asked Robin Williams if he could do a few comedy sketches for everyone involved in the movie. Interestingly, some of Williams' sketches ended up being part of his dialogue in 1992's Aladdin. For number 7, we have Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring. We love poking fun at the fact that Sean Bean's characters keep dying in movies and TV shows, but the man is one tough Stark. During the production of The Fellowship of the Ring, the cast had to fly to remote locations via helicopter, but Bean, who's afraid of flying, would only do it when absolutely necessary. When they were filming the Snowy Mountains bit, Bean would wake up earlier than the rest of the cast, dress up as Boromir, and climb 2 hours from the base of the mountain to the set near the top. The crew being flown up on the helicopter could see him huffing and puffing on their way up. At number 6, we have The Shawshank Redemption. Tim Robbins actually learned how to read a crow's behavior in this movie. When Andy starts working as Brooks' assistant, the crow begins squawking. Robbins actually had to time his line so that the crow wouldn't squawk over him. His timing's very noticeable because if you watch the scene, you'll see him watching the bird carefully before approaching and waiting for it to squawk. This is just another reason to love the movie even more. Now for number 5, Saving Private Ryan. During the production of Saving Private Ryan, Tom Sizemore, who plays Sergeant Mike Horvath, was battling drug addiction. Spielberg gave him an ultimatum, saying that he'd be blood tested on the set every day while filming, and if he failed the drug test, he'd be fired immediately, and his part would be recast. Battling drug addiction is one of the toughest things a person can do, but maybe Spielberg's tough love was what Sizemore needed. Next is number 4, The Theory of Everything. Eddie Redmayne's one of those actors, like Christian Bale, who'll transform themselves like a chameleon for a role. To prepare for his role, Redmayne met Stephen Hawking only once during filming, and it was for 3 hours, but he felt he couldn't ask Hawking intimate questions about his life during that time, especially since he used a computer to speak. So, he found other ways to prep for his role. He trained hard for 4 months with a dancer so he could learn to control his body, and to understand what Hawking went through, he met with 40 ALS patients, kept a chart tracking which of Hawking's muscles declined first, and practiced contorting his face in the mirror for hours. In the end, he did such a good job that an osteopath told him he literally altered the alignment of his spine. We understand commitment, but this is a whole other level. Coming up is number 3, Iron Man. On the flip side of method acting, you've got Paul Bettany's role as Tony Stark's favorite AI. He's never seen Iron Man before and isn't sure what the plot's really about. For the role of Jarvis, he said that he only worked 2 hours in a sound booth, got paid a lot of money, and went on a vacation with his wife, Jennifer Connelly. At second place, we have Interview with the Vampire. Notice how all the actors playing vampires looked so pale and almost bloodless? It turns out they had to hang upside down during makeup application. The director wanted the blood vessels on the actors' faces to appear realistic, so hanging upside down for 30 minutes forced the blood into their heads, making the blood vessels bulge out. This helped the makeup artist trace over them to create the thin-skinned vampire look. We're just imagining a room of actors hanging upside down like bats, with no one talking because of how awkward it is. Finally, number 1, The Dark Knight. Part of Joker's characterization is his constant need to lick his lips. He does it in almost every scene, but it's not something that was written beforehand. The prosthetics that Heath Ledger wore kept falling off during filming, so he'd lick his lips to keep them in place, and gradually, it became part of his character. And now that we think about it, it made his character even better to watch. Little things like that make a movie much better to watch. And that's a wrap, folks. Thanks for watching. Did you know about these weird facts? And did we miss any? Drop your favorites down in the comments. As always, be sure to smash that like button and subscribe to our channel for more videos just like this. See you in the next one.